Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Red Bull win the Constructors' Championship in Japan despite a donkey of the day worthy performance from Sergio Perez, but the big drama of the race again occurring between the two Mercedes drivers. What is going on right now with the strategy in that team? Russell calling for team orders, the team then overturns it, apparently on the back of Toto Wolff getting on the phone and saying, look guys, Hamilton has got to go through, what are you playing at? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. This was the race start, an absolute, complete chaos here. And it's funny really because Sainz got a great start on Leclerc, Hamilton got a phenomenal start on Perez, and they all end up 4 wide. Hamilton gets pushed off the track. The other great starts were from Alonso on the inside, who managed to capitalise on all of this mess on the outside of the track here, and also nearly Max Verstappen got swallowed up by McLaren again, as we saw back in Silverstone, with, basically Verstappen tried to defend hard against Piastri, and then all of a sudden Norris was going around the outside, but Verstappen had the preferable line here. He was able to hold on, and the race was over about 20 seconds in. But there's plenty of other drama going on. Albon again got squeezed here because everyone tries to get to the left side to open up the corner, but when you're like 4 wide, it's going to cause issues. And as we can see here in the background, there was big contact between, you can see Alex Albon's car, which eventually had to retire from the Grand Prix. We can see Sargent here coming out of the pit lane after they had to change basically his entire car, and then he's still locked up and sent it to Bottas. Hamilton had actually pretty hefty contact. Again, the Mercedes is made of something pretty special because he was hit pretty hard by Perez here, forced onto the grass, had a big moment he had to correct, kept it on the track, had a bit of damage, Mercedes reckon, but we'll come to that in a second. Verstappen holds on to the lead, and then the safety car comes out because of instant debris that was going on around the track. So then we get Sergio Perez. I mean, this was the first donkey of the day moment. I mean, it's so clear, like I don't even have to think today for who the donkey of the day award's going to go to. This was I think Alonso immediately noticed this as well. As he came into the pit lane under the safety car, he overtook, before the safety car line, the car on his outside. This is not allowed. So 5-second penalty comes into effect. They then went to serve that later on, after, even maybe before which he had another couple of just horrendous incidents. So let's talk about the Mercedes drama. These guys were going at it. And look, fair enough. George Russell sends a nice little dummy, sends one down the inside of Hamilton into the chicane. Then Hamilton gets him back on the straight, nice little slipstream. So, cool battling, right? If they were fighting for a podium at the end of the Grand Prix, sure. Mercedes have always let their drivers race, which is good. And yes, Russell had good pace at this part of the Grand Prix, but the argument is like, look, Mercedes really right now are fighting for P2 in the Constructors. They need to ensure they're helping each other. And look, I think Russell at times gets unnecessary amounts of hate. I think that he's a better driver than people would generally give him credit for. But he's no Hamilton, he's no Schumacher, he's no Senna, and he kind of acts sometimes like he is. And I think that there's parts of Russell that would prefer to beat Hamilton on a race day than actually maximise the points for the team. And I think we see that quite a bit. And Mercedes really need to start thinking what they're going to do here. Because I know that Russell's meant to be Hamilton's replacement, but Hamilton isn't going anywhere. This guy's made it clear he's around for another couple of years. He wants to extend after that. This is not Russell's team. And he's not the best driver in the team. So, they've got to think about this, because this battling was fun, but it cost the Mercedes guys time that could have been crucial at the end of the Grand Prix. But let's get back to Sergio Perez. He actually made an overtake, a legitimate, proper overtake into the chicane. He got Guan Yu Zhou here, and it was like, all right, fine, Perez, off you go, and see how far he can make up positions. At this point, Verstappen's already romping off into the distance. Piastri saved a bit of time under a VSC, actually, and I believe that VSC was caused by one of the incidents we are about to see. Now, this one, I think, was on Bottas, caused by Logan Sargent, who had a monster lock-up into the hairpin. Again, I mean, what a shambles, this guy. I mean, I don't want to roast him too much, but come on, Piastri's got a podium today, and yes, Piastri's pace actually wasn't great. I mean, Norris was flying in the same car, so there's still some work to do on Piastri's race pace, but Piastri's never driven around here before, so I think you've got to give him credit, and he's still good to get a podium, right, in that very good McLaren today. But Logan Sargent, I mean, what a disaster. Starts in the pit lane after binning his car yesterday in quali before he even set a proper lap, and then takes Bottas out of the race. His car eventually had to be retired as well. And then at the same corner, we get Sergio Perez. What is this clown doing? Honestly, I can't be bothered anymore seeing this guy. Has he lost the plot or something? Like, he failed to get the move done on a Haas on the straight. So he thought, you know what? Let me just send it down the inside from a long way back into the hairpin. No need to make this move. Like, why would you need to make the move there? There's no point. He looks up, he slides into, was this Magnussen or Hülkenberg? I kind of forget, to be honest. I think this is Magnussen, but he looks up, he slides into the side of him, breaks his front wing again. And honestly, Perez today was looking like me when I played the F1 game. He had 3 front wings he went through in the first 13 laps. I mean, what was he playing at? So he has to come into the pits again. And, I mean, yeah, there was some great shots, really, of when Max came into his pit stop, and then they turned the camera around, and you could see Sergio Perez stuck in the garage, because eventually they decided they were just going to retire the car. 15 laps in, retire the car. Of course, he got a penalty, though, for that incident. So then we had this whole clown fiesta, to be honest, where Red Bull realised they can actually send Perez back out because his car wasn't terminally damaged. It wasn't great. They had all these front wings. It was an absolute mess. So on the official post-race analysis, he had a 43-minute lap here in the midst of this. And we'll get to that in a second. But we've got to get to the Mercedes drama. So Hamilton, he locked him a bit going into the second egg nut, went off the track. Russell smelt an opportunity, sent it to the outside of the first spoon, and Hamilton just sent him off the track. And, pretty harsh defence by Hamilton. But look, Hamilton has been getting frustrated with George. There's no doubt about it. They can say what they want internally, but I know that Hamilton's been getting frustrated with him. And even after qualifying on Saturday, Hamilton said some pretty spicy words. Let me just find it now, actually, so I don't have to mention it later in the video. He said this, that after quali, he was like, yeah, I was 2.5 tenths up on George. For a track like this, that's pretty decent, which kind of says to me that he doesn't think George is that good, and he's frustrated that he's kept losing to this guy in qualifying, and now Hamilton, George keeps trying to pull these moves on him, and Hamilton's like, look, just get out of the way, like, I've got bigger fish to fry here than deal with you, and you're like P8 in the championship, Russell is, and Hamilton's P3, potentially going on P2, we'll get to that. So, whatever you think about this particular situation, I think it's just indicative of a wider problem Mercedes have. And I really can't see Hamilton, the way that the team dynamics presently work, I just don't see how Hamilton wins a championship in this environment. Because let's say next year, the W15 and the RB20 are the same strength. They're not going to be probably, the Red Bull's going to be better, whatever. Let's say Hamilton and Verstappen are the same ability, and let's say the W15 and the RB20 are the same strength. Perez, if he is still there next season, will not take any points off Verstappen. Russell seems to make it his business to try and take points off Hamilton. And, as I say, I like George more than I think the average fan does. But I think that he does put himself above the team sometimes, and especially above his own teammates, despite his teammates being in a more promising position in the championship. So then Russell comes on the radio and says, what do we, who do we want to fight? Each other here, or are we fighting the others? And it's like, well, okay, sure, Hamilton kind of went off the track, but Russell was the one that tried to pull the move on Hamilton there and forced Hamilton to go defensive. So, it's a bit of drama, really. And anyway, Alonso had pitted much earlier than everybody else off the soft tyres. Was a complete sitting duck, a nice move that Hamilton made up the inside of Alonso. And at this part in the race, Hamilton did have better pace. Stroll as well retired the car. Albon as well retired the car. There was lots going on, and Perez was getting back in the car. People were like, hang on a second here, what is going on with that Red Bull? And they sent him out again on lap 40 to do one lap, serve his 5-second penalty, do another lap, and then retire the car again. So Red Bull retired 2 cars in today's race, and yet they still won the race with Max Verstappen. So this is a bit of a loophole, really, that apparently they are now closing. So, people are like, oh, again, Red Bull benefit from something, and then the rules change. How coincidental. But yeah, it's a funny one. But a complete disaster class in Perez. It really doesn't get much worse than this. Incident at the first kind of part of the lap, get wing damage, have to change your front wing anyway, get a penalty under the safety car, lock up into Magnussen, have to get another front wing, and then have to retire the car, go out again because you got another penalty. Complete mess when your teammate's dominating the race. But this is when the drama really unfolded here. First of all, I think Ferrari made a bit of a mistake. Russell went to like lap 25 on the mediums. It was quite clear he was trying to do a one-stop. For some reason on Sky Sports, the commentators didn't seem to notice this, but whatever. They got it eventually. Russell was going for the one stop, and Hamilton was going to pit again, as he did, as was Sainz. Now, Leclerc pit and Hamilton pit right behind him. Of course, they don't want to bring Sainz in right there to try and do the double stack, so Sainz, I thought, was going to do one more lap and then box. Hamilton was about 3 or so seconds behind Sainz before that pit stop phase, and Hamilton gained about 2.5 seconds on his outlap. He really pushed on his outlap. Hamilton gained about 2.5 seconds, but still, if Sainz had a pit on the next lap, they probably get out ahead of Hamilton. Might have been a bit marginal, but Hamilton's stop wasn't exactly lightning. I think this one was a 3-second stop. The one earlier of Hamilton was a 4-second stop. Mercedes pit stops and their strategy and their car ain't looking so good now as it was a couple of years ago. But Sainz pits a lot later, I guess with the plan that, well, fresher tyres, we should be able to catch him and overtake again. But I think Ferrari might have messed this one up, because really, given all the time the Mercedes boys cost themselves earlier in the race, it should have been 2 Ferraris ahead of 2 Mercedes here, and that would have been massive in the constructors. In the end, they had a bit of a sandwich because Hamilton was able to get the undercut. But then Russell got in the way, right? And it was quite clear the one stop wasn't going to work, right? Russell was dropping like a stone. He was at times over 2 seconds a lap slower than these guys. On average, he was like 1.5 seconds a lap slower. And Russell's idea was that he would keep Hamilton behind him in the DRS. Hamilton would then also defend with Sainz from DRS. And that would have been the strategy to get the two Mercedes to the end of the race ahead of Sainz. I don't think that strategy would have worked. Eventually, they decided to abort mission on it, and I think for good reason. What they really should have done is just Russell should have let Hamilton go immediately. The threat here was Sainz getting Hamilton as well. Sainz had a few lap fresher tyres and arguably a faster race car today than the Mercedes was. He was the threat to Hamilton. Hamilton, if he'd have got past Russell at the first time of asking, then Russell could do some good defending on Sainz as he did to Leclerc before Leclerc put that great move on him around the outside of the first corner. Then they would have pretty much secured the P5, P7, which is probably the best they were going to get. Doing it like this gave a very good chance Sainz gets both of them. I think he was going to get Russell anyway. And some people might say, well, you know, they should have done the thing, Russell, Hamilton, Sainz. But the problem with that is, Russell's going to be so slow through the first sector. Sainz is going to be right on Hamilton's gearbox. And eventually, Sainz is going to go for that move on the inside of the hairpin that, well, Perez did and failed to deliver on. And, like, Hamilton's got to constantly watch his mirrors, watch out for Sainz. Sure, maybe in a very unlikely scenario, you get to the end of the race and both drivers are ahead of the Ferrari, but very unlikely, right? I think the best way for Mercedes to deal with this was just for Russell to let Hamilton go immediately. And maybe then, this was before Sainz would have caught up, then maybe he could have dragged Russell along in DRS for a couple of laps, giving him a better chance to defend from Sainz when he eventually arrived. But the way that Mercedes did it meant that the risk was that Sainz gets both of them. I just don't think it was well managed at all. And then, once Hamilton did get ahead, it was like, all right, you know, Russell agreed to the instruction because he said, look, it's an instruction, George. You got to let him go. We're telling you this. That apparently came from Toto Wolff getting on the phone. I think they're really missing James Vowles, I've got to say, in that Mercedes strategy department, because why is it on Toto to get on the phone and say, look, guys, what are you doing? Get Hamilton in front of George right now. We're going to lose both of these positions to Sainz. It ain't looking good. So, and even then they were like, oh, Lewis, slow down and give George DRS. And Hamilton had to slow down so much, he lost about 1.5 seconds slowing down to let George through, despite the fact that the way they'd managed it wasn't good, and it meant that Hamilton couldn't chase after Leclerc, because let's say Russell lets Hamilton go immediately, he might have got Leclerc for P4. Maybe not, probably not, but there was a chance there. Because Russell held up Hamilton for so long, P4 was way off the table, P5 was the best they could possibly get, and there was a chance that it was worse than that if Sainz catches up to Hamilton. So at least the way they did do it allowed Hamilton to gain, 2.5 seconds on Sainz, because Sainz was stuck behind Russell for 1 extra lap than Hamilton was. But then they were like, oh, Lewis, slow down and give George DRS. Now, Lewis didn't fight this instruction, but it did mean that he gave George DRS, but it didn't matter anyway, because Sainz's tyres are so much fresher, plus the slipstream, he's going to get the move done. I just think it was a real disaster class of Mercedes, and in the end, it ended up like this, with Sainz chasing down Hamilton pretty hard. And in the end, Hamilton had enough to hold on to that position, and George finished P7 as he would have done anyway. So, yeah, controversial to say the very least. At the front of the field, by the way, a double podium for McLaren, their first one of the season. Piastri's first podium, awesome stuff. So, yeah, Max, Lando had really impressive pace today as well. And Max only won by 19 seconds, which is a lot, but it's not the 30 seconds that Hamilton thought. And, yeah, Norris was in like 0.3 of a second or so for Verstappen's pace. And yeah, Verstappen was probably holding some pace in reserve, but still I thought that was impressive. The nearest Mercedes, 50 seconds behind Verstappen, and Russell was further back than that. Gasly gets the final point after Ocon and Gasly swapped at the end. That was a bit controversial in and of itself. Only 15 finishes after, well, a disaster for a few drivers. A lot of it was caused, in fairness, by Sergio Perez. Red Bull, in the meantime, they win their 6th Constructors' Championship. It's been coming, there's no doubt. And here's Perez lapping up the glory after what a great result that he did today. And this now is how the Constructors' Championship looks. So Red Bull have won. I mean, they've got double Mercedes points. But Mercedes are 20 points ahead of Ferrari now. And this is the battle. The battle is potentially for Hamilton P2 in the drivers. He's only 33 points behind Perez, which is probably too much to gain, but it's definitely possible. 6 races to go. If Hamilton gets a couple of podiums, a couple of DNFs for Perez, it's still on the table, P2 in the drivers, and P2 in the constructors should be Mercedes' other big focus right now. So there were some comments on this from Mercedes. Bradley Lord says, oh, they just raced each other hard. But have a look at this, right? So Russell gets out of his car. I'll just make sure you guys can fully see this. I think this is going to be good enough. Russell gets out of his car at the end of the race and just walks on. So this is Hamilton in front, and yeah, okay, sure, they're tired after the Grand Prix, but Hamilton just walks, Russell walks right past Hamilton, no acknowledgement, no like, oh, good race, mate, good racing, nothing like that. They don't really acknowledge each other, they just walk on past. And I mean, I'm telling you, man, there is friction there between these drivers, there's no doubt about it, and they're not even in a championship fight. And, well, if there is a championship fight between these two, man, that is going to be something to behold, I gotta say. Well, probably Hamilton wins comfortably, but yeah, it's going to be spicy. And this is what Toby Gruner says from AMUS, that it was Toto Wolff who came on the radio, because he's not at the Grand Prix this weekend, and said, look, guys, what are you doing? Get Hamilton past right now to not risk losing both positions. George lost like 10 seconds over the next 6-7 laps. Like, there was no way that George was keeping Sainz behind anyway. They just had to let it go, and they risked losing Hamilton's position as well. So, yeah, I just don't understand why Mercedes are going in this manner. It seems like they want to treat Russell and Hamilton entirely equally, but the championship position and, frankly, the strength of the driver pairing doesn't really add up to that. And as I say, like, Russell acts sometimes like he's Michael Schumacher, where he's actually Ralph Schumacher, or whatever you want to say. Hamilton had no comment on the in-lap as well. He was just like, yeah, very difficult race. He went complete silent the entire in-lap, as apparently was Russell. And, okay, maybe that was just because he was exhausted, which he did say after the Grand Prix. But as he also said, we're not fighting for driver's position in the championship because, firstly, we're not close. Secondly, we're not fighting for the championship. It's about getting maximum points for the team. I think that's what I did in the end. And he also said, this strategy to give Russell DRS was not a good idea at all. When they suggested it to me, I knew that they had obviously thought of it from the last race, and it made no sense, right? Like, just because Sainz did it successfully in Singapore doesn't mean it was going to work in this circumstance. As he says, I needed to get my car as far ahead as possible. Russell was always going to lose position to Sainz because he was on a 1-stop and we were on a 2. So, I mean, yeah, I don't really know what's going on here. And even Hamilton went on to say, I've scored the most points for this team, basically saying, look, I'm doing the job here with the constructors, boys. Like, Russell needs to pay some respect type thing. So I think it's a very interesting team dynamic there at Mercedes right now. And yeah, we looked at this comment slightly earlier, which says the same thing. Russell was a little bit more cordial after the race and said, annoying, we had good battles. At the end of the day, didn't change our race result. He had the right to the line. That's part of racing. So yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting what's going on at Mercedes right now. And frankly, they are losing ground in the constructors big time. Every weekend for them right now is like damage limitation compared to the Ferrari progress. But yeah, 20 points only Ferrari are behind. And right now they're looking probably favourites, you could argue, to secure themselves P2 in the constructors, despite being nowhere really at the start of the season. So that's pretty much it for today. Just to close as well with Sergio Perez to cap off the Donkey of the Day awards. At least he did put some points on the board today, but they were penalty points. 4 on his licence for the safety car infringement and crashing into Magnussen. Thanks for watching as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.